regardless. All right, Imam, we'll let you talk and then you can head out. Shannon, you want to come on in? Colette, you want to come?
Next.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna
We'll just line up.
Yeah, try to line.
So over here.
It'll be a little cozy, but yeah,
Let's
just
just get in there.
Veronica, and Ayla. No, come on in. But we're just gonna get.
Oh, they're just sitting.
I'm just showing the massive
I know, I didn't know if I was
We're
gonna
gonna
roll
make some
whatever.
room.
trying to offer.
That's right. They need
Let's make some room for Adam over here. Okay. Are you ready? The numbers. And when is I go?
Just a reminder to turn your cell phone off. Thank you.
I'm Lainey Haybrock. I'm Lainey Haybrock, Government Affairs Director for the Council on American Islamic Relations, Oklahoma chapter. Last night, while many of us were preparing for bed, a nightmare was unfolding for dozens of our Muslim brothers and sisters. A tragedy that all people of faith fear the most. These gunmen were not born with horror in their hearts. They did not wake up one night with sudden impulses for brutality. Evil this big takes time. We call incidents like this rogue. We call these perpetrators of violence lone gunmen. But the truth is, they are not lone in their hatred. They are not lone in their bias against people of other races or nationalities. They are not lone in their senses of religious superiority or their sense of misplaced nationalism. No, these people often have a community, albeit maybe a small community, perhaps just online or a friend or two, but a community of encouragement nonetheless. These pockets of hatred are made stronger or weaker by the larger narratives of leadership. When the leaders of our nations, of our states, of our communities come out in solidarity with minorities and the oppressed, it cuts off the air supply of hate groups. Likewise, when leadership speaks rhetoric of fear-mongering and division, it is gasoline on the fire of hatred, xenophobia, bigotry, and violence. Leadership matters. Today, we call on leadership. We call on elected officials to contact their local mosques and ask how they can support and show solidarity. We call on faith leaders to speak out against rhetoric that divides us and points fingers at immigrants, religious minorities, and other oppressed peoples and blames them for systemic problems. And most importantly, we call on the people of Oklahoma to see this atrocity as a tragedy not against people far removed by oceans, race, and religion, but as an assault on our very selves, as an assault on our brothers and sisters in humanity, a tragedy against innocent citizens who were people of faith and family, just like ourselves. Today, we have many people of leadership here in solidarity with us. And the first I would like to introduce is Imam Inchasi with the Islamic Society of Greater Oklahoma City. He's going to have to leave right after he speaks to get to early morning prayers.
Last night, I tried to get some sleep because the night before that, another grandson was born. However, like many of you, I was watching the news with horrors. A gunman walked into a mosque in the holiest month for Muslim, the month of Rajab, and the holiest day for Muslims, the day of Friday, and the holiest time for Muslims, Jumu'ah prayer, and the holiest place for Muslims inside a mosque. I tried to make sense of what happened, but no one can. I dozed off. My phone kept ringing. It was mostly a lot of local enforcement people from Oklahoma City, from the FBI to the Oklahoma State Troopers to the police, the chief of police, all assuring us that things will be okay. Tried to doze off again. And then the interfaith community keep calling. I probably had 1 million phone calls, and I'm sorry I have not answered all of your calls. I tried to doze off again to realize that I have a cousin in Christ Church, and he was actually at the service. Yes, Saeed Inchasi, my distant cousin, was in that service in that city. We meet a month away from the Oklahoma City bombing. And as we look at New Zealand, we realize that no walls could have prevented that. Islamophobia and anti-Semitism is at all-time high. We call upon our elected officials, especially those in higher office, to refrain from using our faith for their political purpose. Today is Friday, and in a few minutes I will be given yet another sermon about putting faith over fear. I think I have given a couple of dozens of these sermons over the year. As we all gonna meet today at the mosque, I have asked my congregation to be careful. We are just worried, but we will not be intimidated. We will not be intimidated because we live in a city that knows who we are, that we have the interfaith community here amongst us, that we know that we as Oklahomans, as Americans, are better than that. Our prayers and our dua and our salat is with the victims and their family in Christ Church in New Zealand. Indeed, there's no words will describe the pain that they have went through. But as a people of faith, as a people who actually are cloaked with faith, we know that God Almighty has a divine wisdom in everything he does. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Imam.
Thank you.
Next, we have CAIR-Oklahoma Executive Director Adam Sultani.
Thank you. I was born in 1983 in Kansas City, Kansas. I was raised by a Muslim father and a Catholic mother. Growing up, my parents taught me that kindness and compassion are more important than anything else. That getting to know other people, regardless of what differences we may have, should be a priority over divisions. That love for your neighbor, regardless of their faith, their culture, or their ethnicity, is supreme. This is the way I was raised. At the age of 17, I accepted Islam as my faith. And Islam quickly taught me that at its core, just like the other Abrahamic traditions of Christianity and Judaism, is all about peace. This is why I don't understand what happened. And I don't understand why things like this continue to happen. Last night, my worst nightmare came true as a Muslim. I have many times gone to sleep worried for my community. I have many times woken up in the morning and gotten ready for my day to say goodbye to my wife and my children, wondering if I would return home to them, knowing that only as a Muslim, walking out of my home each day, my safety could be at risk. We have to ask ourselves, when will this violence stop? We have to come together, not only as people of faith, but we have to see past our differences and see that we are human beings and we share a common humanity, and that life is precious. I watched the video of these people as they stood worshiping God. And as we stand worshiping God every day, 5 times a day, and as we come together on a day like today of Friday, we always start with the opening chapter and the opening verse, in the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate. So as I watched those people, I just thought about, as they were standing in prayer, calling upon God with mercy and compassion, that they were met with such hate and animosity. We owe it to ourselves as people, as human beings, as Oklahomans, to come together and to heal these wounds. And I leave you with this, that there is one verse in the Holy Scripture, the Quran, that is followed by 1.8 billion Muslims around the world, that constantly resonates through my mind, in which God says that he created mankind into different nations and tribes, or you could understand it as different races and ethnicities, not so that we would be divided, not so that we would hate, but so that we would love and get to know one another. So my fellow Oklahomans, let us love and know one another, and let's heal together. Thank you.
Mind if I ask you real quick before you go on? When you see so many leaders from different faith communities come together at such a sad time, what does that mean to you to see that?
You know, I travel the country frequently, and I meet with Muslim leaders from around the country, and oftentimes they see on the news some of the challenging things we have in Oklahoma, the hate rhetoric from some elected officials, the attacks against mosques, the hate crimes, and they ask me, Adam, why, as a Muslim, would you stay in Oklahoma? Why live in a place that seems backwards or that seems to be racist and Islamophobic? And I tell them, you don't understand Oklahoma. That when bad things happen, and unfortunately they do continue to happen, that Oklahomans know how to come together. This is not the first time, and this will not be the last time. It does not matter if it's attack against Muslims or Christians or Jews or any other faith community, or if it's an attack on a culture and ethnicity. We have learned from our mistakes, and we have learned that we cannot fight hate alone. And when I see people come together, it reminds me as an individual, and it reminds our community that we are not alone in this, because it can sometimes feel very lonely to be the target of hate. And so we appreciate our interfaith community. They stand with us today, and we will always stand with them.
Next, we have CAIR-Oklahoma Civil Rights Director, Veronica Leisure.
Today we are brought here together by an act of hate and violence and bigotry. 49 people are dead. Dozens more are wounded after these attacks on mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, after one hateful man opened fire on some peacefully praying people in their house of worship. The shooter posted a manifesto outlining his fears of white genocide, his fears of immigrants, and his fears of Muslims, and his intent to incite more violence and racist attacks, specifically his intent to incite further division among the polarized United States to achieve racial separation and solidify white supremacy. I'm not making this up. This is clearly spelled out in his 74-page manifesto. This is not an interpretation of his words. It's not an extrapolation. And this massacre was not the act of a crazed madman unaware of the weight of his actions. This was a calculated, planned, intentional attack, an attempt to incite racist, xenophobic violence against immigrants, Muslims, and people of color. It was an act of terrorism designed to exploit the divisions that we've drawn against each other in this increasingly polarized society. We are, of course, encouraging our community to increase their vigilance as they attend Jumu'ah prayers today, and to communicate with local law enforcement should there be any concerns. I have spoken directly with the representative from local law enforcement who is going to be coordinating additional security at houses of worship and Islamic centers, and we always appreciate that our local law enforcement takes seriously the safety of our community and that they are prepared to act in support. We also know that our friends in the interfaith and social justice communities are going to wish to express their support and solidarity, and those prayers and kind thoughts are deeply appreciated. We just ask that people be considerate of people's grief and the need to spend time with friends and family. I want to close my statement by reminding everyone that hatred is driven out by light, but that light must come from a source. We will not defeat intolerance by simply hoping it goes away. We must remember that as we practice vigilance in watching our houses of worship and watching out for people as they attend prayer and staying in communication with law enforcement, we must also practice vigilance in our hearts, in protecting ourselves and each other from the rot that is distrust and fear and hatred. We can and we will fight each and every day against the racist and xenophobic rhetoric that makes all of us a little less safe, and we will carry with ourselves the two principles of hope that are driving us all: anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and the courage to see that they do not remain that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Reverend Shannon Fleck, Executive Director of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches.
On behalf of the Oklahoma Conference of Churches and the coalition of 17 different Christian denominations, interfaith houses of worship, and nonprofits, we stand with our Muslim community here in Oklahoma and our Muslim community around the world. We stand alongside you, sharing in your pain and your shock. We will walk side by side with you always as we all find a way forward. We will journey forward together as we always do. Acts of evil and terror, which is what these were, will never prevail over unity and love. And we vehemently and unashamedly stand in unity and love with each and every person. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend. Now I have Rabbi Abby Jacobson, President of the Interfaith Alliance of Oklahoma.
Thank you. I'm President of the Interfaith Alliance of Oklahoma, and I'm also the Rabbi of Emmanuel Synagogue. I'm here representing both the Jewish community and the Interfaith Alliance community. In case it needs to be said, let us say unequivocally that the Jewish community and the Interfaith Alliance condemn all acts of terrorism and violence directed at civilians, at worshipers, whether Muslims or any other religion, ethnicity, race, gender, orientation, ability, identity, refugee, or citizenship status. Muslims and Jews both share the idea that our first human created was called Adam, a person created of this earth. And it is God's glory to show that we take one mold, the mold of Adam, and that God creates humans, 7 billion of them, each individuals, each unique, where humans can barely make two coins that look the same. And Muslims and Jews share the idea that whoever destroys one person's life, it is as though that person has destroyed an entire world. The truly scary thing to me is that our lives are dictated not only by a series of choices we make, but by a series of choices other people make, and the circumstances dictated by those choices. Religion has served as one way to help people feel a sense of empowerment in a world we will never be powerful enough to control. When a house of worship is attacked, when a religious community is persecuted, it takes away that feeling of empowerment that helps so many people feel happier as they walk through lives riddled with uncertainty. We commit, therefore, to continue to do everything we can to help restore that sense of empowerment. When a mosque is threatened, when a woman is scorned for her hijab, when a man is harassed trying to board an airplane, when an American citizen is told to go home, when criminal justice is not justice for all, when immigrants are met with fists instead of helping hands, we are here for you. Tell us how best we can support you, and we will do everything we can, not just today, but every day. Communities that suffer will be in our thoughts and our prayers, in thoughts as we think of how best to help, and in the prayers of our feet as they rush toward those in distress, and the prayers of our hands as they continue to do work of support.
Thank you, Rabbi. Next we have Reverend Kayla Bonowell, from Church of Open Arms and the Cathedral of Hope.
To the worldwide Muslim community, we offer our heartbroken condolences and solidarity. As an ordained Christian pastor in the United Church of Christ, I vow, along with my communities, to use the love and power of our faith to continue to transform the evil of anti-Muslim hate, the terror of white supremacy, and the horror of gun violence into the beloved community that we should be, which shares dignity, equality, and compassion for all.
Thank you, Reverend. Finally, we have Miss Colette Dayton from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Thank you. Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Oklahoma join with all of you in expressing our deepest sympathies and grief and solidarity with our Muslim friends throughout the world after such a heinous, violent crime perpetrated against the congregants in Christchurch, New Zealand. It is our constant prayer that God will heal and protect those affected by such tragic events. When the security and religious freedom of any faith is violated, we all suffer. Houses of worship should be safe for people to join in sacred fellowship and seek communion with God. We condemn the environment of hate-filled rhetoric that has become so prevalent. Intolerance has no place in our society. It is a responsibility of good people everywhere to speak out and stand up for each other's rights to worship and live peacefully. Thank you.
That concludes our press conference, but we will open it up for questions at this time.
Just anyone who wishes to talk about it, you know, how important this show of unity is at times like this when any one particular community is targeted.
Lori, do you want to?
I am Lori Walke, Loriwalke, one of the ministers at Mayflower Congregational UCC. And I think what you see here today is the fruits of a long-standing relationship in the interfaith community. Many of the folks that you see standing up here were just a few weeks ago at Muslim Day at the Capitol in an expression of love and support on a day where no one was sad, but we were rather celebrating the role of the Muslim community as an integral part of who we are as Oklahomans. Folks who run a food pantry and support the vulnerable in ways that they do every single day, that Christian churches are doing every single day, and the Jewish community is doing every single day, and that other faiths are doing every single day. And so it's not just that we show up on these days, but we have a long-standing relationship with one another. And so I do think in some ways it makes these days more painful, because these folks are folks we serve alongside. We are ministering with each other. And so when there is an attack on one of us, it is an attack on all of us, full stop. And we have to come out with one voice, which is what you are seeing here today, to say this is not okay. And we reject the fear and the hate underlying the violence that happened yesterday.
Tell us your name and your title again.
Reverend Lori Walke, Mayflower Congregational UCC.
Can you spell your name?
Loriwalke.
And what's the name of the church?
Mayflower Congregational United Church of Christ.
Thank you.
I had a question for Veronica. You were just talking about the heightened security that's going to be at all houses of worship and Islamic centers. I didn't know if you could talk a little bit more on what people might expect to see that are going to those places.
Well, for obvious reasons, we can't list or detail the additional security. Our foremost concern is the safety of those who will attend Friday prayers today. I don't think it would be responsible of us to list exactly what law enforcement is planning to do, but we do encourage the community, the Muslim community in particular, to continue to go to worship. What this man wanted was to scare people away and to intimidate them out of the expression of their faith, and we will not let that succeed. And so we want to encourage people to know that the Muslim community is safe and protected, that we are keeping an eye out, that we do have everyone's back, and that local law enforcement will be taking any and all threats very, very seriously and will be responding to them accordingly, should that occur.
Is that something you guys are working on with Oklahoma City Police, or who would be providing that kind of security?
We've talked to law enforcement from Oklahoma City as well as surrounding jurisdictions to make sure that mosques and Islamic societies really across the state are going to be safe and protected.
Would they plan to, I don't know what exactly, if you can't say, that's fine, but would they plan to have like extra officers stationed at different places? Would that be something that?
I'm sure that that's one of the ways that they're going to be monitoring the situation, yes.
And is this something for just today, or do you think this is going to continue for days or weeks ahead?
I can't honestly say. I think that the heightened vigilance and the increased security are measures that we're going to be encouraging for several days to come until we can really be sure that the threat of copycat violence is non-existent. But honestly, increased security at mosques is something that Oklahomans have been taking very seriously for a great many years now. It would not be the first time that a mosque in our community has been targeted, unfortunately, and sadly, it probably won't be the last. So we are keeping an eye on and we are encouraging that increased sense of security and just for people to be vigilant about their own safety.
No incidents of any kind that you know of, right, though, since this happened?
We have not been made aware of any threats, but we are monitoring very closely, and law enforcement, like I said, is also paying attention, and they will be taking any threats very, very seriously.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.